The games and Zelensky-Trump meeting. Trump ain't a real man. Today, I'm going to talk about the massive argument feud that happened at the Zelensky-Trump press conference this past Friday, on the 28th of February, and the games in it. I'm approach this using dating games terms learned from Mr. Locario. There are a lot of games in their argument. We can use the dating games to understand this situation. I'ma analyze the situation and give my own suggestions for Zelensky in terms of games at the end of this video. So this is like a review response video like Mr. Locario does on some viral clips, as he often does. In this video, we're going to focus on Trump's side's mistakes and why his actions show that he ain't a good leader. Therefore, a real man, as we speak so much about in the dating games. And I'ma point out a couple of things Zelensky could have done better. Zelensky showed himself to be more of a man or a real man than Trump. But there were things he could have done better. Trump made so many mistakes in that conflict that I won't be able to cover them all in this video. President Zelensky of Ukraine and President Trump of USA, at their press conference this past Friday on the 28th of February, had a fallout, a full-on argument, and huge feud. It was heated, it was crazy, shots were fired, it was nuts. It was maybe unprecedented in history. It almost turned into a full-on fist fight. People were raising their volume. They were talking over each other. There were yelling and shouting and hollering. First of all, here are the facts. Y'all can look for the video and check it out yourself. The videos are everywhere. Zelensky came to USA. This time's objective was to sign the mineral deal. A huge argument broke out at the last 10 minutes of their joint press conference. The root cause of it is that Zelensky and Trump could not agree on Trump's strategy for ending the war. The direct cause was Zelensky's questioning regarding J.D. Vance's answer to the press about using diplomacy. J.D. Vance was answering a reporter's question and mentioned change of strategy from the last U.S. President Biden on this Ukraine-Russia war. He said we are trying a different strategy, that is to use diplomacy. Zelensky asked J.D. Vance a question. I am paraphrasing, of course. Zelensky raised doubts about the usefulness of Trump's strategy, including the mineral deal, the ceasefire, talking with Putin to get this war ended. It's easy to see that he ain't agreeing with Trump's strategy, and my man Zelensky had many and legitimate reasons to do that. During J.D. Vance's response, Zelensky started talking to him. And the next thing is the point where everything went nuts, and the reason why I attribute the mistake to J.D. Vance and eventually Trump. Again, y'all can check the video. J.D. Vance lashed out, snapped at, interrupted Zelensky when Zelensky was speaking. Then J.D. Vance interjected and overtalked many more times when Zelensky and Trump were talking. J.D. Vance said it's disrespectful for Zelensky to come to the White House and oppose Trump and on live TV. Here, J.D. Vance checked Zelensky, as we say in game language. And that's the point where all hell started breaking loose. Now, the condescension from J.D. Vance was off the charts, yo. The disrespect, as we say in game terms. I'd say this was the point and the thing that Zelensky could have done better, that Zelensky should have stopped the conversation, stood up, and left. Which is the method Mr. Locario speaks so much about when dealing with bad situations. J.D. Vance was admonishing Zelensky as if Zelensky was lesser than, as an adult to an infant. J.D. Vance proceeded to throw crap about disrespectful, ungrateful. When did you say thank you? J.D. Vance talked to Zelensky not as equal, not as a man to another man. One simply just doesn't insult a man right in his face. Especially when the man has done nothing wrong. That ain't the right way to treat anyone. If the guy has done something seriously wrong, then he doesn't deserve as much respect. Even then, one shouldn't humiliate him in his face. That's highly dangerous. Things could get out of hand fast. Because with men, there is always the possibility of violence. Men have high level of testosterone. That means lots of aggression and the muscles to back that aggression up. So first, he insulted Zelensky as a man. Then, J.D. Vance insulted my man as a country leader. However small and weak and broke Ukraine is as a country, its leader deserves the same level of respect, especially in person. What? you are going to treat countries differently just because they are inferior or weaker in power or poorer? Doesn't that sound like the gameless? Dudes treat women differently based on their perceived attractiveness level of those women? I'ma do things differently with a dime, with a 10 woman. I wouldn't do the same with a 4 or 5, or an ugly-looking fat chick. I'ma try harder with the dimes and suck the 10s, but... And we know that's a bad practice. There, we just talked about why J.D. Vance was wrong in the substantive aspect. Now I'ma address the procedural aspect, or the format aspect. J.D. Vance seriously overstepped. It wasn't his place to check Zelensky. The reason being that he was not Zelensky's equal, in the sense of rank level. Zelensky is the president of a country's. However weak or small this country is, Zelensky is the top leader of that country. J.D. Vance was only the vice president of USA's. It's a huge difference. USA's vice president doesn't have real power. Vice president traditionally has been a hollow position. This was even in the Constitution. Vice president's allocated power is to cast vote in the Senate when there is a tie. J.D. Vance should have felt grateful and honored that he was speaking to a president, someone that's higher in status and rank than him. In game terms, the analogy is something like man A talking to man B, and man B's GF wife woman decided to join in, and in the defense of man B. And we all know that men and women are not equal, correct? That's what Mr. Locario and the dating coaches say all the time. Men and women are not on the same level. Men are higher in status than women, and that is by default when one is born. Men are naturally physically stronger than women and can impregnate women. This is another point where Zelensky could have handled it better. Zelensky shouldn't have even talked to J.D. Vance altogether. Zelensky should have just ignored J.D. Vance answering to the press and get back to talking to Trump. Zelensky started engaging with J.D. Vance by asking a question about the effectiveness of diplomacy, while in fact, Zelensky shouldn't even mind or pay any attention to J.D. Vance. Even talking to J.D. Vance is acknowledging him and recognizing him. Zelensky did, and by doing that, he basically brought himself down to J.D. Vance's level. This really looks bad for Trump, because J.D. Vance is Trump's derivative and his extension. Like we say in game, a woman follows a man. What the woman does reflects on the man. The man makes the rules, and the woman follows them. The woman is the man's representation, and so on. Trump was J.D. Vance's superior. Trump wasn't able to check his subordinate when his subordinate made mistakes. Trump failed to check J.D. Vance when J.D. Vance was severely out of line. Instead, Trump joined in with his subordinate. Trump brought himself down to his subordinate's level. Therefore, like we say in games, the woman was leading the man. We know that the man should always lead the woman. J.D. Vance was Trump's woman, and J.D. Vance was leading Trump. This appending of the roles is nuts. Trump needs to charge, like we say in game, J.D. Vance to the game. Trump allowed J.D. Vance to hijack the conversation to J.D. Vance's direction. J.D. Vance was having Trump to complete what J.D. Vance wanted. Just like the woman leading the man in a situation, J.D. Vance was hugely out of line. WTF, he wants? A mutiny? A rebellion against Trump? He's out of control. Trump failed to keep his men in line. The thing I would change in this conflict for Zelensky is that to just stop the conversation and get up and leave. He didn't need to argue or continue the meeting. He should have just stood up and left when the conversation first started to deteriorate, or when J.D. Vance was first out of line and checked Zelensky, or even when Zelensky sensed that this conversation was getting sauce. This is one of the strategies that Mr. Locario preaches all the time. It's a brilliant strategy. I love it. I have used it many times. It works well. It has worked well with hollering at women. It has worked well in situations other than in the dating women and men scenario. It is the single easiest and most effective strategy to solve problems. Any problems at all. It works well with women. It works well at work. It works well with store employees. It works well with anybody and in any situation. Just stop the conversation and stand up and leave the situation. This is better than arguing it out. Like Mr. Locario says all the time, just don't fuck with them, and find new ones that are nicer. Don't waste your time and energy. It's not worth it. It's much simpler and effective this way. This way, you'll get women faster. You just go find the women who will fuck with you. The same applies to this diplomatic incident. Zelensky did well in the entire argument. But the better way is to stop the conversation, get up, and leave. And you know, as Mr. Locario says, respectfully, Zelensky didn't need to deal with all that crap and disrespect or to have the headache. He didn't need to endure all that insult and humiliation. He didn't have to go through all that. He should have just got up and said, not that he needed to say anything at all. Thank you, Mr. President. It has been an honor to be your guest. There's nothing more to talk about. I'm done here. I need to go. Again, thank you for inviting me here. And then just stand up from the chair and leave the Oval Office. Two things will be achieved easily and effectively. First, Trump would have understood what happened and what Zelensky was thinking. Second, Zelensky would not have to deal with all this crap and waste his time and energy. This is the simplest and most effective way dealing with that situation. And maybe even the best way, period. However, Zelensky didn't do those things. Maybe he doesn't have enough game. Maybe he needs to regularly tune in to Mr. Locario's show. Maybe he needs to be on the Bad Boy membership. He'll fit right in. He already has massive balls. But he just needs to learn new strategies, techniques, and games.